There was just a proposal put forward by a community member to allocate the $4 million that the community's been talking about for the past 2 weeks. Let's dive into what's in this proposal. This proposal was put forward by a community member, Rabbi. Now, he's been seen quite a bit in the Terra Rebels Discord. If you're ever in there, definitely recommend you guys join in if you're not already in there. Okay, so essentially this proposal aims to distribute the roughly $4.1 million in the Ethereum cross-chain multi-sig wallet into different manageable chunks with specific intents to try and maximize the use of that money. By the way, before we get too far into this, be sure to check out this proposal. There's a lot of text in here. Now, I'm going to provide you guys the high-level summary, but there's a lot of valuable information. This has been really well thought out, so I highly recommend reading this. But let's keep going here. So right off the bat, they highlight some of the big issues that the community has had with previous proposals for spending this $4 million. So right off the bat, doesn't lean on the goodwill of undoxed individuals. That's been a problem the community has addressed based on other plans to allocate the $4 million. It also doesn't require funds to pay individuals who will then manage the money and handle the funds, distribute the funds, oversee it, all that. So the first thing that needs to be done is divide the assets into the smaller portions with the different sections that we're going to get into here in just a second. Hire legal representation or a firm to oversee the process. Obviously, there's a lot of legal issues that can be involved when you're talking about $4 million of money. They need to be able to verify where that money came from, verify that money is supposedly clean. There's not issues with the origin of the money for people to be able to then receive. And that kind of gets into step 3 of what that legal counsel will do. Again, make sure that there's no legal liabilities or prior entanglements. If necessary, nominate certain docs trusted individuals to act as key holders. Now, this is a key point right here that's been talked about in the community quite a bit. One of the issues that's come up about the multi-sig proposals is that the current set of multi-sig holders want to have another group of multi-sig holders to pass on the access to. So right now, essentially, if you think about it like this, you have 3 different keys that unlock a door. And to unlock the door, you need all 3 keys. Now, what happens is right now there's an individual person for each key. They want to give those keys off to another set of individual people. In this example, 3 different people who will then each have 1 key. And so they don't want to give one person all 5 keys to entirely control the $4 million. And so this is where this potentially comes in. And then after that's done, deliver the funds according to the outline below. Now let's talk about how these funds would be distributed. Right off the bat, we're going to take 35% of this amount, purchase Terra Luna Classic, and send it to the community pool with the objective of funding future projects, dApps, incentives, developers, marketing outreach, and so on. So essentially ecosystem development with this money. Then we're going to send 30% directly over to Terra Rebels. So Terra Rebels obviously has been working for months for free on the Terra Luna Classic ecosystem, and going forward, they hope to continue working, and they need payment to make that happen. Now, this proposal specifically says that this is in order to compensate them for all the months of unpaid work. Now, the Terra Rebels did volunteer to do this for free. However, essentially what Rabbi is saying here, and my understanding of what Rabbi is saying, is that they want to compensate Terra Rebels for all the work that they did. Now we have some money, and let's give that back to the Terra Rebels to show our appreciation for all that they've done so far, and then hopefully also structure some plans to fund them in the future. But this seems to be looking back on the work that they've done. Now, there has been talk about Terra Rebels not receiving money from the community and not wanting to do that because they don't want people to view a conflict of interest, particularly in response to the community pool. Now, if they end up voting to reject the funds, then the money would be used to purchase Terra Luna Classic and send that directly into the community pool for the same purpose as the 35% mentioned before. It goes to Terra Rebels or it goes back to the community pool, which is not the worst thing. Then we have 10% that's going to a fiat reserve with the explicit purpose of funding hardware/endpoints if TFL withdrawal supports and leaves Terra Luna Classic out to dry. So for anyone who doesn't know, right now TFL is still funding the endpoints and hardware needed to run the Terra Luna Classic ecosystem. There's been a wide range of estimates for the cost, but it's in the thousands of dollars, potentially up to $1 million, depending on how insane the volume on the ecosystem gets. And that's on a monthly basis. So this could cost a lot of money to run these endpoints and the hardware, depending on how much volume we can get back to, transaction volume on the ecosystem. And so if Terraform Labs ended up saying, hey, we're not paying this money anymore, we'd be kind of screwed as a community, honestly. It would not be good. We'd have to struggle to find the money to run those endpoints and hardware. It would be an absolute mess. And so this is setting aside some reserves. That way we can hopefully take that over if need be and not have a total mess on our hands for a little while. Then we have another 10% that would be in fiat or crypto set aside as a contract/bounty for development work. So essentially bringing in external developers who can lighten speed up Terra Rebels' workload. Now this would be managed under the supervision and control of Zardar. Something worth noting for this section in particular, every completed bounty would pay 85% of its reward sum to the external programmer or corporation, 15% to Zardar. So every amount of Zardar assigns, let's say $10,000 as a bounty, he's going to end up keeping $1,500 in that instance. And the reason for this is quite simple. It's compensating him for the work hours and effort needed to run and organize all of this. All this money necessarily doesn't have to go at the beginning. So this 85% that's going to be distributed off to this corporation or individual programmer, it might not be initially all at once. It might be, let's say, 35% up front, then 15%, then the rest at the end. There's going to be a distribution schedule, and Zardar would need to oversee all of that, check in on them, making sure that they're meeting deadlines. There's definitely work that would be involved on his perspective. 5% would then be used to be purchased Terra Luna Classic and split against the small validators, and there's a set of criteria that they need to meet. So some key things, there's some time limitations outlined right here in the goal here. Again, make sure that these are new validators, make sure that they're not trying to exploit this airdrop, and that they actually have been in the validator program before this proposal came out. They need to have voting power less than or equal to 1%, at least 98% uptime, so they really need to be contributing, and they need to be a small validator. And if someone or a company owns additional validators, only one would be eligible. And the reason for this is quite simple. There's a lot of validators who are running at a loss right now. It costs anywhere from $500 to $1,500 to run a validator node every month. And if you have less than roughly 1.5% voting power, you're right now running at a loss if you bought the more expensive package. 4% would be set aside as fiat or crypto collateral for help the eventual repeg of the stablecoin in the future. So there's been lots of talk about this. I'm not going to get into too many details here, but essentially let's set aside a little bit to start moving forward towards a repeg. And this would be under the jurisdiction of Duncan from the Terra Rebels team. And yet again, a consistent theme here. If the team refuses to take these funds, then they'll be diverted into the community pool. Then we have 3% that's going to be going to Ed Kim's grant program that he released a little while ago. This is, again, going to be funding utility on the ecosystem, trying to provide some of that money. Very similar to the community pool because Ed Kim's program would pull from the community pool, but this would be sending it directly over there to help fund the team who's overseeing those projects and dApps and helping onboard people into the ecosystem. Second to last one here, 2% set aside for legal counsel to ensure that they're clear of any legal liability. There's a lot of potential problems that come when you're dealing with $4 million, transferring it like we talked about in the beginning and like's been talked about a lot. So we're going to leave it at that. And then finally, 1% is a direct payment over to Alex Forshaw as a finder's fee. He did work with Do Kwon and trying to get this money arranged, trying to figure out the details behind this money. And so this is essentially reimbursing him for his time and work that he put into trying to organize this funds and get all the information for us. And so a vote yes is that you agree with everything outlined above and how the funds should be distributed. And a vote no is you disagree with some or most of the above and how the funds should be distributed. And if you wanted to donate to help them actually fund this proposal, that information is right here. So my final thoughts after going through this proposal a couple times is that this is a well thought out, well written proposal. There's a lot of details in here, a lot of information. I'm sure I missed a couple things and maybe misunderstood some stuff because it is a little bit of a dense document due to how much value there is in this document. However, overall, I think this is a great idea. The biggest potential issue I see with this proposal is the fact that a lot of funds are being allocated to individual people or Terra Rebels specifically and not sent over the community pool. I know a lot of people are very adamant about sending everything to the community pool or burning everything and taking a very all or none approach. But I think something like this where you're sending 35%, you're sending a lot of money to the community pool right off the bat, and then you're also going to potentially send more depending on if these different companies or different individuals refuse to delegate and manage these different amounts of money. There could be more going to the community pool. And so I think it's really important for us to reflect and ask ourselves, do we really need to have full control over everything here? And I don't mean like just let them take the money and run away. I think there should be some outlines, and this would be a recommendation for this proposal, some outlines of accountability and transparency of, hey, we're going to give Duncan the money for the repeg that was outlined. And in that example, if we end up doing that, then hey, Duncan has to provide every month or whatever it is, a list of information. And we can determine what that is. Maybe it's just the balance. Maybe it's what progress has been made that month. We can determine some of those ideas for accountability and transparency. And so that would be the transparency aspect. And then the accountability aspect would be if he doesn't do what we're wanting, the general roadmap here, the general idea, how do we then make sure he's held accountable? We're right now something like 2.5, 3 weeks in of discussing what should happen with this $4 million. Do we really think that we should all have control over this community pool? We've seen people in the community just do some crazy things the past couple of weeks. People hating on each other, just an absolute mess in the community the past couple of weeks. Do we really think that we're responsible enough to handle this? There's been a lot of misinformation. There's been a lot of confusion. There's a lot of people just making up accusations out of nowhere saying, hey, you wrote this random proposal. I know you did. Why don't you just admit to it? I know you didn't actually put your name on it and all this stuff. It's like, do we really think that we should have these people determining the entire future of the blockchain? Or should we say, hey, we're going to send X percent, 35% in this example of this proposal, to the community pool? Everyone gets a voice. That person gets a voice. Zardar gets a voice. I get a voice. You as the viewer get a voice of what happens. But we're also going to go to the people we trust, the people who really know what's going on here. We're brutally honest with ourselves. We don't know what we're talking about in most cases. When I went ahead and started to try and get technical, and I thought, hey, pulling some data from the blockchain, that wouldn't be that hard. That would be an easy project for me to just grind out. I spent 30 hours in 2 days grinding out, trying to figure out how to use APIs, how to get access to these APIs, how to do some of this stuff. And that might seem simple to people who have experience, but if you've never done it, trust me, it is a pain in the butt. And when we actually go and I go, hey, I have been able to do an investigation into insider trading that was published by Bloomberg, for example. I felt like I knew a decent amount how the blockchain works and all this stuff, how to interact with some code, how to get a little bit technical. I knew nothing. Once I started trying to actually do something and build and provide value through the ecosystem through developing, I was screwed. I knew nothing. And it took me so much time to get anywhere with that. And so I think it's really important for us to reflect and notice that, hey, maybe there are technical things that I don't know. And I know that I probably don't know 98, 99% of the technical stuff out there. And I think it's important for everyone in the community to reflect on how much do you really know? And should we maybe delegate some of this with those experts? We have general big picture stuff that we can determine. Hey, do we want to fund a DApp? Do we want to fund this game? Do we want to fund this DEX? We can make some of those big picture decisions. But when we get technical as to we're bidding on a project for blockchain development, we're trying to pick who's the most qualified for the bids, we probably wouldn't have any clue and any really way to determine that. So personally, I think delegating with some individuals is a great idea and a way to simplify this process a lot, where we don't have to constantly do community votes and we can go with some trusted individuals. And we really need the two key things. We need accountability and we need transparency. That way we can actually use the accountability. And so for me, if this proposal added some more clarity around how there's going to be accountability and transparency in a reasonable way, we don't need hourly, daily logs for each individual within Terra Rebels with a summary of what work they accomplished that day. Like, this is a third party that's being contracted. In this example, we're talking about funding a lot of third parties that would be contracted to work on our ecosystem. Again, between dApps, Terra Rebels, other developers for the layer one, a lot of different groups and people who would be contracted. They would not be employees of us. And so it's important that we treat them with that respect. You still want to make sure that your contractors are working and doing the job according to what you agreed upon, but you're not micromanaging them. Let me know your guys' thoughts down below. I'm hoping we can move forward from a lot of these discussions and just get something done, because it seems like we've just been dragging some of this on a long time. But I want to know what you guys think. If they added some more clarity around accountability and transparency in this proposal, would you vote yes, or do you just want to burn the money instead?